The intention is to try and re-establish the large carnivore guild here, and one of the important predators in that are African wild dogs.
Imagine reintroducing one of Africa's most elusive and dangerous predators to a park devastated by decades of war. Would it help or harm the fragile ecosystem? The gamble Mozambique took to bring back African wild dogs was unlike any wildlife project before, and the results just 2 months after their release stunned researchers. Between shattered landscapes and depleted wildlife, this bold move aimed to restore balance. But what actually happened after setting these predators free reveals unexpected shifts in animal behavior, ecosystem dynamics, and community impact, raising the question, can nature truly bounce back from near total collapse? The ecological collapse of Gorongosa National Park in Mozambique was once a lush sanctuary teeming with wildlife and one of Africa's premier safari destinations.
Mozambique's Gorongosa National Park was the envy of Africa.
Before the country's civil war erupted in 1977,
In 1977, this African paradise became a battleground in a raging civil war that lasted 16 years.
this park was home to more than 200 lions, around 2,500 elephants, thousands of buffaloes, gnus, and zebras. The balance of predator and prey created a vibrant ecosystem that supported the forest and its vast biodiversity. But this peaceful coexistence was violently disrupted when the war broke out, stretching until 1992 and leaving the park nearly deserted. The effects on wildlife were catastrophic. Poachers and soldiers ravaged the animal populations for meat, ivory, and survival. By 1994, a census revealed that 99% of the large animals had vanished from the park. Elephants were hunted relentlessly for their tusks, which were sold to finance arms and ammunition. Traps, snares were scattered throughout Gorongosa, targeting antelopes, but often capturing unintended victims, further decimating populations. With the predators largely wiped out, the entire ecological web lost its foundation. Large carnivores such as lions and wild dogs, which once regulated herbivore populations and maintained the balance of the ecosystem, were reduced to mere fragments or disappeared altogether. The region's rich tapestry of life unraveled, leaving vast stretches of the park vulnerable to degradation. The void created by the absence of top predators meant that natural processes shifted dramatically, though the full repercussions wouldn't be understood for years. Over the decades following the war, some signs of recovery began to emerge, but this recovery was uneven and deeply flawed. Herbivore populations rebounded much faster than predators, with certain species of antelopes increasing dramatically in number. Their population exploded because the pressure from predators had been removed. But these rapid changes came at a cost. The ecosystem was out of balance, with herbivorous animals occupying areas they once avoided and altering the vegetation dynamics. This uneven recovery also triggered behavioral changes in some species. Baboons, for example, became more nocturnal and started sleeping underground, a precaution that hinted at deeper ecosystem instability. The rising numbers of herbivores created a landscape where vegetation experienced heavy grazing, threatening young trees and plants essential for habitat diversity. Although some animals were returning, the interactions that sustained a healthy ecosystem had been disrupted, presenting a complex challenge. The long-term absence of predators set in motion a cycle that could have led to irreversible damage. Without natural checks and balances, the park's flora faced overgrazing, and the fauna risked further losing diversity. These changes highlighted a critical flaw. Restoring animal numbers alone could not guarantee the ecosystem's health. Key predators needed to return to rebalance these disrupted relationships and revive the processes that had sustained the forest for centuries. Despite the obvious need, the magnitude of this problem was not initially clear to local authorities or many conservationists. They focused on increasing numbers of visibly recovering species, unaware that the lack of predators kept the ecosystem off-kilter. Only someone with a fresh perspective, external to the traditional conservation circles, recognized how fragile this recovery truly was. This realization would soon lead to one of the most ambitious ecological restoration projects on the continent. The true extent of the collapse and its cascading effects on both animals and vegetation set the stage for an intervention that would defy expectations. The challenge was greater than simply bringing animals back. It was about restoring a delicate and complex balance. Gorongosa's story was far from over. What happened next would change the course of conservation in Mozambique forever. Nature's delicate balance awaited a powerful catalyst for change, and that change was about to enter the picture. The rise of herbivores and ecosystem imbalance. The patterns emerging in Gorongosa after decades of conflict painted a paradoxical picture. On one hand, millions of hectares were scarred by war, but on the other, certain animal populations began to flourish without their natural predators. Shrub antelopes flooded the flooded plains, which had once been pristine yet predator-free zones. Their numbers swelled to approximately 65,000, an astonishing increase that revealed a shift in the ecosystem's dynamics. This surge in herbivores initially seemed like a positive sign of recovery, but it concealed a growing imbalance. With carnivores nearly absent, these prey species had lost the natural threat that kept their habits in check. They grazed longer and ventured further into open plains without fear, altering plant communities through overbrowsing and trampling. Areas that were once protected by predation became heavily grazed, allowing fast-growing grasses to dominate, but threatening the survival of young trees and shrubs vital to biodiversity. This pattern of imbalance sent subtle warning signs throughout Gorongosa. Some animals altered their behavior. For instance, baboons started sleeping underground and shifted their activity to nighttime, demonstrating the lingering effects of predation pressure, even when predators were scarce. Essentially, without apex predators to enforce natural checks, the safe rules that had governed animal behaviors unraveled. This situation told scientists that recovery wasn't just about numbers. It was about reviving complex interactions. The outpacing growth of herbivores created a precarious ecosystem where plant regeneration faltered, risking degradation that could eventually affect all animal species depending on the forest's structure. The dominance of herbivores also increased the pressure on water resources, as large herds grazed and moved in concentrated areas. Over time, this would threaten the natural resilience of Gorongosa, potentially locking the park into a less diverse and less stable state. Restoring balance ended up being about this big, obvious gap. The top predators just hadn't bounced back on their own. Large carnivores like lions and wild dogs, which were kind of essential for reining in herbivores, stayed at dangerously low levels. Their comeback was slow, but meanwhile, the herbivores kept growing in this sudden, almost shocking way. And then you start to wonder, like really, how do you put a natural order back when it's been thrown off for decades? Underneath all that, conservationists were landing on a tougher idea. Adding more animals isn't the same thing as getting real ecological health. Predators don't only change things by hunting, they also shape the whole place. Because fear does matter. It makes prey behave differently. They roam in other routes, and they feed in different patterns. Without that landscape of fear, herbivores can start overusing certain spots, and then plants lose variety, and the knock-on effects spread outward through the entire ecosystem. On top of that, the pressure from people didn't just fade around Gorongosa. You had communities still trying to make ends meet, plus illegal hunters going after animals for meat and ivory. All of this made predator recovery harder than it should have been. And when protection is too weak, the whole problem turns into a higher-stakes search for something that could work both ecologically and socially, not just in theory. Still, this imbalance ended up setting the stage for a bold kind of trial. It involved reintroducing a top predator that had been missing for decades. Bringing it back was supposed to show whether nature could find its rhythm again, or if the damage from conflict and long-term imbalance was too deep. In the end, the species selection and the way it was brought back would decide a lot about how Gorongosa's future could be reshaped. With hope for change beginning to flicker, the next crucial piece emerged from an unexpected source far from Mozambique's borders. Who is behind the revival? The revival of Gorongosa's ecosystem owed much to one man whose background was far from traditional conservation science. Greg Carr, a successful American entrepreneur in telecommunications and internet ventures, had little formal training in ecology. Yet, his vision and commitment would become the driving force behind one of Africa's largest and most ambitious ecological restorations. Initially, Carr's involvement in Mozambique was humanitarian. After the Civil War, he arrived to support post-conflict development and infrastructure projects aimed at helping local communities heal and rebuild. Witnessing Gorongosa's near-total collapse firsthand, he quickly realized the fragile state of the park and the vital role it could play not only for wildlife, but for the region's future. Unlike many donors who contribute funds and leave, Carr took a hands-on approach. Since 2008, his foundation formed a long-term partnership with Mozambique's government.
In 2008, I signed a contract with the government of Mozambique to co-manage the park,
Investing over 100 million United States dollars in the restoration efforts. This financial commitment was accompanied by rebuilding conservation teams to combat illegal hunting, training park rangers, and expanding schools and health services nearby.
Here in Gorongosa, I have a wonderful team of about 1,000 Mozambique. We're working in the next door with schools and with healthcare.
Carr understood that protecting wildlife required supporting the people around it. One of his key insights was that poverty drove poaching. As long as local communities struggled to survive, animals would remain at risk. Creating alternative sources of income and engaging locals as stewards of the park became central to the project's success. Thousands of jobs were created, helping shift attitudes toward wildlife from threats to valuable assets. Beyond the human development part, Carr also pushed hard for fixing up the physical surroundings. The whole effort planted about 3 million trees on Mount Gorongosa, with the idea to boost water holding and keep the lower plains steady. And yeah, this kind of environmental restoration ended up being crucial for a more sustainable home where both animals and people could actually live with less stress. Carr's style was kind of hard to pin down, but it mixed giving back with business instincts and a genuine respect for how nature really works, not just as a simple thing. He wasn't really stepping in as an outsider, more like a collaborator alongside Mozambicans, backing their own leadership and their vision. That partnership mattered, because the project could move forward steadily, even while political trouble and ecological issues kept showing up. Still, even with all that money and progress, some core problems stayed. The herbivores came back quickly, but the predator numbers lagged, stubbornly low. That suggested the ecosystem was not fully formed and still pretty exposed. Carr and his people kept hitting a central dilemma. How do you reintroduce the missing hunters that would rebalance everything without triggering another kind of disaster? That question basically set the scene for a bold plan meant to bring back one of Africa's most endangered and hardest to spot predators. The next chapter in Gorongosa's recovery would lean on that choice, and honestly, the result would surprise basically everyone in the room. The presence of herbivore overgrowth and social investments made the delicate reintroduction of predators was the keystone to Gorongosa's regeneration. Why African wild dogs? Choosing which predator to reintroduce to Gorongosa was a decision weighted with ecological, logistical, and symbolic significance. African wild dogs, often called the continent's most endangered and efficient hunters, emerged as an unexpected yet fitting candidate. Their role as predators is unique. Not only do they hunt in highly cooperative packs, but they also exert a subtle, mobile pressure on medium-sized herbivores that other predators like lions and leopards might miss or leave alone. These wild dogs operate as nomadic hunters, covering vast territories and targeting prey with relentless stamina. Their presence influences prey behavior differently from larger predators, causing herbivores to constantly adjust their feeding and movement patterns. This dynamic creates a ripple effect in the ecosystem, controlling overgrazing and supporting vegetation diversity. Wildlife experts recognize that restoring such a predator could re-establish important ecological checks and balances long lost in Gorongosa. African wild dogs are also one of the most difficult carnivores to conserve. Their populations have been decimated across Africa due to habitat loss, disease, and human conflict. Attempting to bring them back to a park recovering from war was daring. The risks of failure were high, and success required intensive monitoring and support. But the potential benefits outweighed the dangers. Reviving this species could signal a return to a more natural and complex predator-prey system. Beyond ecology, these dogs symbolize hope. They had disappeared from Gorongosa years ago, victims of the same war and poaching that nearly erased all large animals. Their reintroduction represented a tangible step toward healing, showing that even the most vulnerable species could find refuge once again. The choice was also practical. Wild dogs could adapt to the park's size and conditions, and their pack behavior allowed conservationists to work with a manageable social unit. The wild dog's hunting style complements other carnivores in the park, such as lions and leopards, creating a multifaceted predator hierarchy. Each predator species targets different prey and occupies unique niches, together maintaining a richer and more balanced ecosystem. Reintroducing wild dogs was a strategic step toward restoring this layered predator landscape rather than relying solely on the return of large cats. However, the challenges ahead were considerable. African wild dogs require stable social structures within their packs, delicate balance in population genetics, and protection from human threats. The stress of capture, transport, and release can easily disrupt their social bonds, leading to failure in establishing lasting populations. Conservation teams needed to be meticulous in planning every detail to give these animals the best chance at survival. Selecting wild dogs also underscored the urgent need to address human-wildlife conflicts. These predators sometimes venture beyond park boundaries, risking encounters with livestock and local communities. Gorongosa's managers had to implement not just ecological restoration, but social frameworks that fostered coexistence. Without local support and effective anti-poaching efforts, the wild dog's return could be short-lived. Still, the prospect of watching this rare and elusive species reclaim their ancestral territory generated excitement. African wild dogs embody the wild spirit of Africa's plains, and their return promised to bring life and energy back to Gorongosa. It was a gamble that blended science, hope, and determination, a calculated risk that challenged conservation norms. The moment had arrived to begin one of the continent's most ambitious predator reintroductions, but the journey would be filled with uncertainty and delicate hurdles. The challenges of reintroducing predators. Reintroducing African wild dogs to Gorongosa was an operation steeped in complex logistics and delicate biological considerations. Capturing the right individuals, transporting them vast distances, and ensuring they formed stable packs for survival required extraordinary care. From the beginning, conservationists knew that a single mistake could spell disaster for this fragile species. In March of 2018, 15 wild dogs were selected from healthy populations in South Africa. These included 9 adult males and 6 adult females, carefully chosen for their health, age, and social compatibility. The goal was to create packs with strong social hierarchies, essential for cooperative hunting and breeding. Unlike many reintroduction efforts, simply releasing the animals was not an option. They had to be prepared physically and socially for a new environment. Transport itself posed enormous risks. The journey spanned over 1,000 kilometers by air and landed the animals in a terrain unfamiliar to them. Because wild dogs are highly sensitive to stress, the transport team meticulously monitored their vital signs, providing sedation and special crates to minimize dysfunction. Sadly, despite these precautions, one adult male died shortly after arrival due to transport complications. This loss underscored just how fragile the process could be. Once at Gorongosa, the wild dogs were not immediately released into the wild. They spent 8 weeks in a large fenced enclosure to establish pack cohesion and leadership hierarchies without external threats. This acclimation period was vital for reducing stress and increasing the chances that the pack would survive once free. Scientists closely observed their behavior, ready to intervene if social breakdown occurred. Even with caution, the first pack faced difficulties. While initially hopeful, their first litter, born in the park in 2018, was abandoned, likely due to predator presence, such as pythons near den sites. This early setback revealed the intricate challenges in reintroducing predators to an ecosystem still healing. Researchers took these lessons seriously, refining strategies for habitat selection and predator management. Later that year, a second pack was introduced from a different South African population known for resilience in harsher environments. The longer journey of roughly 1,300 kilometers by air demanded even greater care. This pack fared better, successfully breeding and expanding their territory. Their triumph was a beacon of hope, proving that, with patience and adaptation, the project could succeed. Throughout these efforts, ongoing challenges persisted. Wild dogs in Gorongosa needed protection from poaching, accidental snares, disease transmission, and conflicts with humans. Their pack's natural mobility meant they occasionally ventured outside protected zones. Additionally, highly social behavior made disease outbreaks like rabies or canine distemper a serious threat, given how quickly illness can spread in close-knit groups. The return of these predators would soon reshape the landscape, and not just through hunting. Early setbacks and lessons learned. The reintroduction of African wild dogs to Gorongosa did not start smoothly. After their release, the first pack faced critical challenges that revealed just how complex restoring a predator could be. The alpha female was pregnant before release, raising hopes for a quick population rebound. However, when the pups were born, the entire litter was abandoned inside their den, likely due to the presence of nearby predators like African rock pythons, which posed a serious threat to vulnerable pups. This abandonment was a stark reminder of how unfamiliar dangers and environmental pressures affected the animals. The situation forced scientists and park managers to rethink their approach. They began to study the habitat preferences more carefully, especially where the wild dogs chose to den. Adjusting the selection of den sites to avoid areas with high predator risk became a priority in future releases. It was clear that success depended on understanding the nuanced relationships between species and environment. Another lesson came from monitoring the dog's stress levels. African wild dogs are highly social and sensitive creatures. Even minor disruptions can fracture pack hierarchies. Early observations showed that stress from relocation, transport, and environmental unfamiliarity could unsettle these complex social bonds. This prompted the team to keep the dogs in acclimation enclosures longer, allowing pack dynamics to stabilize before entering the wild. Despite those initial setbacks, the data collected ended up being kinda invaluable. It showed, even when plans are meticulous, the natural world still keeps variables that are hard to control or flat-out predict. Scientists then ramped up their tracking using GPS collars plus camera traps, mostly to get a clearer view of how animals move, how hunting goes, and how these dogs interact with other predators. Those early steps, kind of quietly, laid the groundwork for tuning the reintroduction strategy later on. Meanwhile, the researchers became more alert to human impacts. Poaching snares, still reduced, yes, but not gone, kept creating unintended hazards for the wild dogs, because they often roam beyond the zones that are actually patrolled. Once the risks were identified, patrols could be aimed more precisely, protecting the populations that were slowly growing. On top of that, education programs pushed awareness in nearby communities, stressing coexistence instead of conflict. The first litter didn't just stumble, it failed outright. And still that moment fed resilience in the conservation team. They didn't treat it like pure defeat. Instead, they saw it as a necessary piece of the learning process, like you have to go through it. Patience became the main tool. Each misstep taught something useful, especially about predator behavior and the shifting dynamics inside the ecosystem. And honestly, those experiences shaped what came next for the reintroductions. By the close of 2018, a second pack was introduced, this time from a drier, harsher setting in South Africa. The dogs arrived more ready to handle stress, plus the rough realities of new territory. The second release went better overall, with the pack spreading out fast, then hunting on their own, which signaled real progress without much doubt. Understanding and embracing these challenges was crucial in shaping the future of Gorongosa's predator reintroduction and the health of the entire ecosystem. Signs of recovery and population growth. Following the initial struggles, the wild dogs of Gorongosa began showing remarkable signs of recovery and adaptation. The second pack, introduced in late 2018, thrived in a semi-arid environment, bringing a resilience that was immediately noticeable. Unlike their predecessors, they successfully raised multiple litters, with one beta female named Nyamagaya, giving birth to 8 pups, an extraordinary number that demonstrated strong reproductive potential. Within just over 2 years, scientists recorded an impressive population growth. From the original 29 founder individuals, the wild dog population swelled to approximately 100 to 2 by mid-2020. This rapid increase was unprecedented for African wild dogs, a species often regarded as one of the hardest predators to support in the wild due to their complex social structure and sensitivity to environmental change. The survival rate of founding members reached around 86%, a figure considered high and hugely encouraging by ecologists. This success stemmed from continuous monitoring and adaptive management practices that allowed the team to adjust to evolving challenges. Careful habitat management and anti-poaching efforts proved vital in protecting the packs from human threats. As the population grew, so did their territorial range. Sorta. The wild dogs initially occupied a modest 501 square kilometers, roughly 13% of Gorongosa's area, and that was about it. Within months, they expanded their range to cover over 1,000 square kilometers, more than twice their original territory. That shift suggested the ecosystem could probably host even larger populations later on, because 68% of the park remained unused by these predators. The growing presence of wild dogs started to change how prey species behaved in a big way. Herbivores like bushbucks, kudus, and waterbucks adjusted their grazing habits and became more on guard. They also avoided long exposure in open areas where they were easier targets. This kind of landscape of fear helped spread out grazing pressure and gave vegetation a chance to rebound in spots that had been overbrowsed earlier. Oddly enough, scientists observed that the dogs didn't wipe out prey populations. Instead, their controlled hunting seemed to promote a more even dynamic that kept one species from running the show too hard. This subtle but forceful effect basically supports a healthier and more diverse biological community. In turn, it helps many plants and smaller animals that depend on a stable system. And beyond the biology part, these ecological changes brought hope to local communities and park managers. A predator population that was getting stronger drew more tourists who wanted to see this unusual conservation narrative in person. Ecotourism started giving economic reasons to keep wildlife protected. Plus, it could strengthen community involvement along the way. The delicate balance forged by these predators would soon face fresh challenges, both natural and human, that would test Gorongosa's restoration like never before. ongoing risks, and future outlook. Even as the African wild dogs steadily reclaimed their territory in Gorongosa, significant challenges continue to threaten their survival and the broader ecosystem's recovery. One of the most persistent dangers comes from human activity, notably poaching and the use of snares intended for other animals. These indiscriminate traps can accidentally ensnare wild dogs and other predators, leading to injury or death, often beyond the immediate sight of park authorities. The wild dog's natural mobility further complicates protection efforts. A pack can travel tens of kilometers in a single day, frequently moving beyond the park's strict supervision zones. This exposes them to risks in buffer areas where anti-poaching patrols may be less frequent and interactions with local communities increase. Even a single trap or encounter can have outsized effects on these endangered animals. Disease outbreaks represent another severe threat. African wild dogs are highly social, with tight-knit packs that share food and care for each other's young. While this social structure supports survival, it also makes it easier for contagious diseases such as rabies, canine distemper, and parvovirus to spread rapidly. The gateway for many illnesses is contact with domestic dogs living near the park's edges, highlighting the complex interface between wild and human-influenced environments. Climate events add yet another layer of unpredictability. In March of 2019, Cyclone Idai devastated large parts of Mozambique and flooded areas of Gorongosa.
Hundreds of people have died in Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi following the worst cyclone to hit that region in a generation.
Studies reported that within a week, flooded zones increased nearly five-fold, drastically changing the landscape. Such environmental disruptions affect water availability, forage quality, and the movements of both predators and prey, challenging the delicate balance needed for the ecosystem's recovery. Amid these pressures, Gorongosa's conservation efforts have diversified a bit, not just in one direction. Alongside the wild dogs, predators like leopards, lions, and spotted hyenas are gradually coming back or being brought back in controlled ways. It's this sort of multi-layered return that matters, because a healthy system can't lean on just one species alone. Each predator seems to do a different job. Together, they bring varied pressures that nudge herbivore numbers and, in turn, help biodiversity along. Still, even with the encouraging rise in predator numbers, the risk of human-wildlife conflict stays pretty high. A study spanning 2010 to 2023 noted more than 400 lion deaths from human causes, with many linked to snare traps placed for bushmeat. So even when reintroduction works, predators end up living a risky life in places people also depend on. That's why constant vigilance, plus real cooperation from communities, is critical to keep these harms from multiplying. Disease management also can't be treated like a one-time fix. Vaccination programs for nearby village dogs, plus health monitoring across wild populations, are key, day after day. Keeping wild dogs safe from epidemics isn't only animal welfare stuff. It also protects the whole predator-prey relationship that the ecosystem's health really depends on. Without those measures, the gains made in Gorongosa could quickly slip back. Looking ahead, many people see Gorongosa as a kind of blueprint for large-scale restoration. The plan is ambitious: habitat renewal, species reintroductions, anti-poaching enforcement, and community development, folded together. Yet, the story isn't finished. Natural pressures and human pressures both will keep testing how resilient this once devastated wilderness really is for years to come. The future depends on sustaining this balance between nature and people, science and hope. The radical reintroduction of Africa's most endangered predators offers a beacon, but also a reminder. Restoration is a long journey requiring enduring dedication, adaptive management, and respect for the unpredictable rhythms of the wild. After decades of loss and balance shattered, Gorongosa's recovery shows that carefully managed restoration can bring predators back and renew the ecosystem's fragile harmony. The story of the African wild dog's return is a testament to human commitment and nature's resilience. If you found this story inspiring, please like and subscribe for more incredible journeys of wildlife restoration and conservation around the world.